Good evening and welcome to day 4 of the 15 Days to a Healthier You program. Tonight we're going to be talking about cutting the negativity. This is something that has really made a big impact on my life, and I'm excited to share with you just a little peek into what I've learned as I've been processing through this and how it has changed my life. So I shared in the workbook today kind of the background of this, and where this came from was I was really called out by a friend not too terribly long ago on the fact that I tend to focus on the negative. And I thought, for real? I focus on the negative? I don't think that's right, because I tend to be a very positive person. I'm kind of one of those people who sees the good in a situation, can always think positively, can always kind of recover and look at the good and be excited about the positive and focus on that. Or at least I thought that I was that kind of person. Well, I quickly realized that as this person was challenging me, they were saying, you look back on the past and you talk about how hard it was or how difficult it was, and it's always like last year was really hard, or last month was really hard, or last week was really hard. And I realized this person they were right about that I do tend to look back and have a negative viewpoint, and I also tend to really make up stories about situations and stew over those stories that I've made up and just feel stress and frustration over things that it's just a story that I've made up. We talked earlier about how what you look for, you're going to tend to see. And if you make up stories about situations and you start to believe that story, then you're going to begin to see through those glasses of that story that you've created and look on that situation in that regard. So I want to challenge you from what I have learned to not do this, because there are so many wonderful things in the world, and we can waste so much time and so much energy focusing on the negative. So I made this commitment. This was a number of months ago after I was challenged with this. I made this commitment and I put it out on Instagram, and I said, I will only speak positive words about everyone. I refuse to say negative words about anyone to anyone. Now, I haven't done a perfect job of this, and sometimes I slip back into my old ways, but one of the words that I have tried to almost completely eliminate out of my vocabulary is the word hard. As in saying something was really hard, or I had a really hard day, or had a really hard week, or whatever. I'll say difficult, I'll say stretching, I'll use other words, but just trying to focus more on the positive. And so when I say stretching versus hard, that's me saying that, it was something that it's stretching me personally, and stretching can be a good thing, whereas hard can just be totally negative. So making this commitment to say, I will only speak positive words about everyone. I refuse to say negative words about anyone to anyone. So this challenge caused me to recognize how much of the time my thoughts and my words were negative. I was dwelling on what wasn't good. I was dwelling on these stories that I had made up. I was dwelling on the discouraging and the hard, instead of seeing all of the amazing things around me. And again, this is the inner health. When we focus on the negative, it gives us a complete negative outlook on life. And when we have a negative outlook on life, it tends to make us feel unhappy, discouraged, tired, unmotivated, and it can affect all areas of our life. So I want to challenge you to consider to pay attention to what negativity you have allowed in your life, whether it's in your mind, whether it's out of your mouth, whether it's what you associate with. Where is the negativity in your life, and how can you try to cull some of that negativity? So making this commitment and putting it out there on the internet has been so helpful to me. And there's some things that I've learned about myself. And I have learned that when I don't allow myself to say negative words about situations or other people, I talk a whole lot less. because you can't gossip. You can't, you just can't talk about people and situations. You just talk a lot less because you have a lot less words to say, or at least I did. And I was really challenged by this to realize how many of my words were things that weren't helping other people. They weren't uplifting other people. They were just empty words, or worse than that, they were words that were causing destruction because they were words that weren't lifting other people up. I have more space in my brain. When I don't let the stories reside in my brain, I have a lot more space in my brain. I have a lot more energy and creativity because I'm not dwelling on those negative things. And I'm a lot happier because I'm noticing the good all around me. I'm noticing the good in other people and other situations. Now, again, like I said, I haven't done this perfectly, but I've tried to really change my perspective and my outlook. And as I've not allowed myself to stay in that negative place and really caught myself and pulled myself out of that, I've noticed that I see a lot less negative stuff in my life. And I realized that a lot of the stuff that I thought was so hard, it was really just me making up stories about situations and then dwelling on those stories and then viewing life through those stories and bringing me down as well as other people down in the process. So I had a question from a reader earlier today that was on Facebook, and I wanted to address this because I thought this was a really great question. And she was talking about how it seems like maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect, or I'm contradicting myself with day 2 and day 4. And I'm going to read her question. Let me pull this up just a second. I had it open and now it is not here, and I gotta go find it. Just a second. Okay. This is from Anastasia, I think is how you pronounce her name. She said, I'm curious to know, Crystal, how you balance the suggestions from day 2, giving yourself permission to process hurts and to feel, not just stuffing hurts down, with day 4, finding the positive, not saying or thinking the negative. If a negative thing, say a negative comment from a friend or commenter on the blog, comes up, how do you approach it with a healthier, positive attitude while not stuffing it down to not feel the hurt or the pain of it, which would then negate day 2's advice? I thought that was such a great question, and I wanted to just address it because some of you might be scratching your head going, wait, okay, in day 2 she told us don't stuff it down, you're supposed to talk about your hurts in a safe place, and then today she's saying just focus on the positive and don't allow yourself to think of the negative. So I just wrote some thoughts, things that I've been challenging myself to deal with situations in a healthier manner. So what I'm not saying is that you go off in la land and you always focus on the positive and you don't ever allow yourself to acknowledge any grief or pain or hurt. That's not what I'm saying in today's lesson. What I am challenging you is to not make up stories about situations and not project those stories. So I talked about how, maybe a friend is kind of treating you in a way that it feels sort of cold. And you could make up all these stories about situations, or you could find out the truth. So for instance, last week I had a situation where there were some friends that were supposed to come over, and at the last minute they canceled. And they had canceled a couple of other times and in recent weeks, and so I started to kind of, the stories started to be, my head started to want to make up stories. And I told my husband, I said, I'm feeling this way, but I think I'm making up stories. So I was acknowledging that I'm feeling a certain way, but I'm also acknowledging that I think I'm making up stories. And he just challenged me, why don't you go and address it? And so I was just really honest in the situation. And it turned out to be that it wasn't that at all. It was just that some stuff had come up and we were able to work through it because I didn't make up stories. Now, what could have happened in that situation is I could have made up this whole big story about how these people just don't like me anymore. I maybe had done something and they just didn't want to be friends with me anymore. And so I'm projecting this whole story on this situation, and then I start living out of that story. So then I start saying, well, I'm just not even going to invite them over. I mean, I'm not going to reach out to them because they don't like me. And just start distancing myself from them when it's this beautiful relationship that I would be missing out on just because I made up a story. So in that situation, it was acknowledging this is how I feel, but I think I'm making up a story. And so then going and fact checking. And that really has been what I've been trying to make my goal, is that in every situation I catch myself when I'm making up stories, and I make sure that I'm only believing the actual truth of what I know to be truth. So some questions that I'll ask myself in a situation in order to deal with things in a healthy manner. Am I dwelling on the negative? Am I just seeing the negative, or am I seeing both sides of a story, of a situation? Am I making up stories and letting those cloud my perspective? Am I wasting time worrying about something that I don't even know if it's true? Am I gossiping? Am I telling something to someone else just because I know a juicy story that I want to pass on? Because gossip does nothing for anyone that's positive. Am I stewing over situations where I have no control? Am I owning what I need to own, addressing what I need to address, and making sure that I know the truth? So those are the three things that I really try to focus on. Own what I need to own, address what I need to address, make sure I know the truth. So in the situation with these friends, it was owning what I need to own, and that was, I'm probably making up a story about this. Addressing what I need to address, but I went ahead and addressed it with them and said, I'm feeling this way, and I'm actually really sad that you couldn't come over, and I'm missing you, and just would love to get to see you. And so addressing it, and then we were able to talk about it, and they were like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I hope you didn't feel like we were just dropping the ball on you guys at the last minute. It was nothing to do with that, and we couldn't get out of this thing. And making sure that I know the truth. So finding out the truth in that situation. And then once those things is loving well, doing the right thing. You can't always change other people's responses, but you can always choose your own response. So remembering that you choose your response, the best response is always love well, believe the best, do the right thing. So instead of making up stories, living out of those stories, distancing yourself from situations, stewing over situations, worrying over situations, own what you need to own, address what you need to address, make sure you know the truth, and then love well and do the right thing. And let the chips fall where they may. If it's not always going to turn out to be this beautiful, wonderful thing where it's tied up in a neat little bow. But you can know that if before God you did the right thing, that you owned what you needed to own, that you addressed what you needed to address, that you loved well, and then you just let it go. Instead of sitting there and for the rest of your life just feeling all this negativity over that situation. Do the best that you can do, and then just trust God with the rest. This is my philosophy. Okay, so your project for today was to, let me pull this up, join me in the no negativity commitment. If you are brave enough, try it, because maybe start with just committing to stick with it for a day or a few days, and then see if you can extend it. Don't say for the rest of my life I'm going to do whatever, but this exercise of just the no negativity and committing to that, I think it'll really help you to see how often you're going to negative thought patterns, to negative stories that you don't know to be true. So if you're brave, join me in the no negativity commitment, and I'd love to know if you're going to join me. Leave a comment on this video and let me know that you're going to join me in that. And then really pay attention to how many negative thoughts you think over the next 24 hours. Start taking account of your thoughts and see how many of them are negative. See how many of them are just empty, worrying, stewing, being frustrated, making up stories about things, and how much of them are positive, good, uplifting thoughts. As much as is possible, look for ways to replace those negative things with gratitude or with laughter, as we talked about in the workbook, or serving others. It's when we are focusing on other people, it's so hard for us to really be sad and feeling stressed, because when we're just giving to other people and serving other people, it kind of helps the things that we felt stressed and frustrated over, it kind of helps all of that melt away. You can't be sitting there stewing and worrying as much when you're just focusing on pouring into other people. Do something when that negativity comes to refocus your brain on something positive and upbeat. And just see what happens. See how this affects you. See what you learn from it. 2 things that I wanted to mention as resources. If you haven't read Ann Voskamp's book, 1000 Gifts, I highly recommend that book. It's just, I think, will challenge you and encourage you to really focus on the gifts that are all around you. And secondly, if you're not in the habit of daily gratitude, of either writing it on your phone, writing it on a Post-it note, writing it in a journal, I would challenge you to try the practice of daily gratitude. When we make the decision to start our day looking for the positive, start our day being grateful, start our day looking around us to see what we can be thankful for, it can change our whole perspective on life. So those are 2 things that I'd like to recommend to you, and I will look forward to hearing from you. If you're going to join me for the No Negativity Challenge, leave a comment and let us know, and tell us how you replace the negativity with positivity. And I'll see you back tomorrow for day 5.